And I think something that was really important that we heard today is it has to be a woman, but not just any woman. Some of the characteristics that were brought out this morning, we're looking for someone with power, but also integrity, an administrator and a general, someone that will take action. And Amina said, and I think this is crucial as well, someone who understands multilateralism. I know during the lunch I spoke to a number of people, and there was a little concern that maybe I was calling for the revision of the charter and for the UN to be brought down. But no, we really need. These are times when we need that institution. It's really important. We're going to turn now to the presentation of the 4th edition of the Women in Multilateralism Report, GWL Voices Flagship annual publication. We warmly welcome all of those who are joining us online through our social media platforms. Please note that this session is on the record. To offer some framing remarks and reflections ahead. Sorry, I've been panicking the front row because I think they thought we were moving straight into the report. But to provide us with some framing reflections ahead of the report presentation, it's my honor to welcome Her Excellency Dr. Natasha Pierce-Musar, the President of the Republic of Slovenia. She has demonstrated a deep and consistent commitment to promoting women's leadership in international fora, ensuring that women's perspectives are not only present, but influential in shaping global agendas and outcomes. Madam President, welcome.
First of all, thank you for the invitation, and I have to say that I am really, really honored to be here, to be among many excellent ladies and some men among us, I see. So, distinguished President and Executive Director of the GWL Voices, dear Susanna and Maria Fernanda, dear fellow women political leaders. What an honor and pleasure is to stand here today and exchange ideas with all of you, fellow women leaders, on building a far more gender-equal system of international governance. It is also a privilege to be part of your inspiring Madam Secretary General campaign during the 80th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations. As Nelson Mandela famously said, "It always seems impossible until it is done." We are here to do just that, together, and to offer hope and inspiration to women and girls around the world that, yes, it is possible. On 17th of December, a group of young women, primarily from Slovenia, but supported by partners across Europe, achieved what many had considered impossible. They succeeded in securing the adoption by the European Parliament of a resolution in support of safe access to abortion across the European Union. As a result, even in countries where abortion is either not legal or not possible due to objections by doctors, women with unwanted pregnancies will soon be able to obtain abortion services in other EU member states where such services are available. The European Commission is now expected to propose measures to translate this commitment into practice by March this year. Now, regarding our aspiration that the next Secretary General be a woman, I would like to say the following. We have all heard this so-called argument many times over. Yes, for women, but the best candidate must win, right? Said with all seriousness and concern. To this, in reality, quite offensive argument, I say, but of course, that is precisely the point. We all want the best candidate to win, but the competition must finally be opened to the other half of humanity. The social overlooking of women must come to an end. And it is precisely for this reason we are raising our voices today, together, to help end this unreasonable practice. The facts are well known. Since the UN's creation, the General Assembly has had 75 male presidents and only 5 female presidents. Unlike the UN Secretary General, who serves a 5-year term with the possibility of reappointment, the President of the General Assembly is elected annually to 1-year term of office. Together with the UN Secretary General, the President of the General Assembly is one of the most globally visible faces of the United Nations. For this reason, Slovenia, together with like-minded countries, has been advocating for the introduction of a gender parity system for the presidency of the General Assembly. I first raised this proposal at the general debate 2 years ago. Some progress has been made, but it is far from sufficient. And as we approach the election of the next Secretary General of the United Nations, I once again call on all of us to open our minds to the possibility that a woman may simply be the best candidate for the role. And I do believe in that. I realize times are not opportune. Even our shared sustainable development goals are increasingly being called into question. But the truth is this: there is never a convenient time for change. We are living in a time of multiple crises. So let us give a real opportunity to the other half of humanity, as I have already said, as she may surprise us all with resilience, innovative problem-solving, and deeply human empathy. And this, our world, our United Nations, needs now more than ever. And if I can say something in Spanish, el respeto no tiene género, es un derecho de todos. I don't know whether all of you speak Spanish here. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is what I have prepared, and I wrote down the statement. And of course, I would like also say some words from the bottom of my heart. This is who I am. I don't know how much you follow international politics. It's a crazy world nowadays. Every single president and prime minister, we are just scared of every single morning how one person in the United States is going to wake up and in what kind of mood that person is going to be. And it's scary to watch where this world is heading at. I just recently had the interview for the Finnish television. And the Finnish journalist asked me, because you know that there are only 3 female presidents in the European Union? It's Malta, Ireland, and you see one here. And I have to mention now Bulgaria, because Rumen Radev stepped down and the vice president took the office, so the 4th lady is there. And the Finnish president said to me, the Finnish journalist said to me, as a woman, what's your advice to President Trump? And I didn't know this question in advance, you know, and I took a deep breath of what I can say and what I cannot say. And I always try to be honest with journalists, I try to be honest with my people, and I try to be honest with the international community. And I do represent a lot of people around this planet, not only as the president of Slovenia. I'm proud to say that I represent also women around the globe. And in between I was thinking, oh, what am I going to say? What's my advice to President Trump? And then I remembered one sentence which one experienced diplomat from Slovenia told me. You know, because at the beginning, coming from the world of activism, the hardest part for me was how to learn the diplomatic language and not be an activist on the presidential position. I'm still, you know, learning. And I don't want to be boring in politics. I want to be honest. And then I said this sentence. That's my advice to President Trump. The wisdom is chasing you, but you're always faster. So please slow down a bit. And this is who I am in this crazy world of men's politics. It's really hard for women, you know, not to be judged by gender, but we are judged by gender. I can see that. When I was a candidate for the President of the Republic of Slovenia, you have to know some of my background. I was never a member of any political party, nor I am today. And the promise that I gave to myself is that I never will be a member of any political party. So it was a total non-partisan campaign. And you know, sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easy, because I do not owe anybody nothing in politics, but it's sometimes hard to make compromises with the people from the government, especially with the Prime Minister. But that's part of the game, I take it that way. But when I was in campaign, I was listening to so many bad and hostile words about my appearance. I lost 27 kilos 3 years ago. I was chubby, but I'm still Natasha, you know, in my soul. Natasha, which I was before when I had 27 kilos more. And one of the journalists in that era, when I was, you know, chubby, called me a Teletubby. I said, okay. But then I met him once, and I said, I will never forget what you said to me, but I will tell you one sentence. When you called me a Teletubby, maybe that was a push for me, you know, to lose weight. And I lost 27 kilos, but your IQ will always be the same. And to come in this crazy world of politics, ladies and gentlemen, it's not hard for a person who was never a politician before, but I was a human rights lawyer. And for example, I'm very proud on my country, especially due to a fact that the 2 years that we were a non-permanent member of the Security Council in United Nations, we really sticked to the vision and to the values that Slovenia does have inside its soul. And when I was given the opportunity to have a speech in the European Parliament in front of 650 European parliamentarians, again, you know, as a president, every single word counts. So you have to have a written statement, a speech. And I always prepare word by word what I wanted to say. But in the middle of that speech in Brussels, when I started discussing Palestine and Gaza, I stopped and I said, here I have 650 representatives of different states and different political parties. I want to be honest with them. And then I said, we are watching genocide in Gaza, and we are not doing anything. And that was not written down in my speech. And then standing ovation from the left side, 2 MPs from the right side left the hall of the parliament. And after that, some people approached me and they said, but Madame President, why are you on the side of Palestine? I said, do you really think that I'm on the side of Palestine? I'm not on the side of Palestine, nor on the side of Israel. I just want to be on the side of humanity. And this is what I do believe in. I do believe in international law. I am a lawyer by profession. It helps me being a president. And I do believe that humanitarian law is the integral part of the international law. Is this left or right? Is humanity and dignity of a person connected to left-wing spectrum or to the right-wing spectrum? What are we doing, ladies and gentlemen, with our planet? And being a woman and saying all those things directly to you, I feel relieved every time I say it. I don't know where I get the courage from, but this is who I am. And I wish there were more women and men like that around the globe. I'm still learning. I know I do not know everything. Every single day I learn, I read, I try to understand realpolitik, if you want me to say so. But just to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, when I told you there are now only 4 female presidents in European Union, there are some in Europe, like in Moldova, in Kosovo, in Iceland, for example. But altogether, out of 193 UN member states, there are only 18 women presidents. Some prime ministers, let's be honest, but there are just simply not enough of us. In some points, ladies and gentlemen, that's our fault as well, because we need to be sure that we do possess the knowledge before we apply to certain positions. I just recently read an article. They analyzed, the young generation of how much knowledge do they think they have to possess before applying to a certain job. And for women, the result was 92%. We have to be 92% sure that we know the content which is necessary for the job. Do you know how high that percentage is for men? It's 60%. So this is the reason why I think that we, especially this organization that my distinguished friends here established, we need to encourage ladies to apply for those positions. Don't be sure that you will know 90% or 100%. You never know everything. So we have to encourage each other. And this is why I stand here in front of you today, to encourage you, your friends in various countries around the globe, to apply for significant international positions or inside in internal politics at your home states. And just to say one more thing, I told you that there are 193 member states of the United Nations, but that there are more countries on this planet. In the International Olympic Committee, there are 206 member states. Sometimes it's easier to become a member of the International Olympic Committee than a member of the United Nations. But if we take 206 as a number of states into account, that means that we do have 206 presidents, some kings and queens among us, and 206 prime ministers. That means that we have 412 people who are in charge of 8 billion people of this planet. And the problems we are facing today can only be solved with the synergy and the energies of both genders. And I do strongly believe in that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam President. Your no-holds-barred honesty was not only refreshing, frankly, it was really inspiring. And it was great to hear of Slovenia's practical steps, the practical steps that Slovenia is taking to reduce the gender gaps across international institutions. So we're going to dive now into the findings of this year's Women in Multilateralism report. And to do that for us, I'd like to invite to the stage Nadara Youssef, co-chair of the Coalition for the UN We Need. She's going to present the main takeaways.
Fantastic. Hopefully my mic is working. Thank you so much, Alyssa. And importantly, thank you, Susanna Malcorra, for making me follow Madam President. That is a tough act to follow, but I will do my best. And thank you to Madam President for joining us here today as well. I look out into the room, I mean, talk about, preaching to the choir. This is like preaching to the priests. But humor me a minute while I run you through some key ideas and statistics. So let's start with a simple question. When the world makes its most important decisions on peace, security, development, climate, and what next for the future of humanity, who's in the room negotiating on behalf of the world? That question is at the heart of this year's GWL Voices annual report, Women in Multilateralism 2026, The Unfinished Quest for Gender Parity. Oh, my clicker is working. That's fantastic. Okay, and if there's one thing you should keep in mind over the next 10 minutes, it's that parity is not a favor, a concession, or a symbolic gesture. It's a governance upgrade. Because systems that don't use the talent of half of the population are just choosing to weaken themselves, right? Because if only the 8 women you see on the slide have run for Secretary General of the United Nations, out of 48 candidates across 80 years, this right here is not a circumstance, it's a system. And that's why the data matters. Expanding on 3 previous editions, this year the Women in Multilateralism Report looks at 62 organizations responsible for negotiating on behalf of humanity. Specifically, the report covers 3 dimensions where leadership power lies. The share of women in senior management teams, the share of women in governing bodies and boards, and the share of women who are chief executives at these institutions. And let's start with the good news. Yes, good news in 2026. Senior management teams of these 62 organizations are becoming stronger models of gender balance. On average, women make up 46% of the senior management teams, and almost 1/3 of the institutions tracked have achieved full gender parity at this level. That is far better than most major corporations, far better than most national politics, and indicates an institutional shift in the system. Yay. Unfortunately, when we move one step up to governing bodies, the boards that control these organizations, that picture starts to change. These boards are appointed by governments, they control budgets, they set priorities, and very often they choose who leads. In 1 out of every 3 organizations, women make up less than 25% of the governing body making decisions on behalf of all of humanity. Less than 25%. See, balance isn't just about all the parts that you have. A bus with 3 wheels on one side and 1 wheel on the other still has 4 wheels. It just won't go straight. Going back to the governing bodies, the UN General Assembly is, of course, as many of you know, no exception. Today, only 23% of the UN permanent representatives in New York are women. By digging through hard-to-find archives, GWL Voices has found that this problem is, in fact, rooted in history. Because when it comes to picking who will represent them at the most far-reaching international forum in the world, countries consistently exclude women. Let's dig into this a little bit. So this big block that you see in purple and blue divides up the New York UN permanent representatives by gender. I will let you figure out which color represents which gender. The darker columns show years in which the UN General Assembly didn't have a single female permanent representative. That's 20 total years, or a quarter of the UN's lifetime, without women leading GA negotiations. But don't worry, I'm told that no important decisions were made during that time, especially those that may concern the lives of women. Let's look at the national data. Here, we see countries that have sent women PRs on multiple occasions. Fantastic. In the blue-gray, 63 countries which have appointed a woman to this role only once in 80 years. In the dark blue, 72 countries that have chosen to never send a woman permanent representative to New York in 80 years. Does this data reveal a systemic habit toward a familiar past? Does this history prevent us from optimizing our institutional intelligence, especially as we head into 2026 with the Secretary General elections coming up? And this leads me to the third and final category that's covered in this year's Women in Multilateralism report, the chief executives. So this big chart of 62 organizations, bear with me though, because it tells a simple story. See, for decades, if you start on the far side, women were excluded from the most important positions in these organizations. But as you can see, from the increased frequency, but also longevity of the blue blocks that represent the time that women served as chief executives of these organizations, that is a trend that is actively changing. By 2023, 42% of these positions were held by women. 1 year later, this has risen to 45%. And in 2025, women held 46% of these vitally important roles. Yay. But I actually have in my notes, don't celebrate too soon. So, because unfortunately, even though these organizations are between 60 and 80 years old, 21 of them have still never had a woman leader. And yes, in the last 80 years, humanity split the atom, ended South African apartheid, walked on the moon, eradicated disease, decoded DNA, built a global internet, created artificial intelligence, and explored Mars, but hasn't quite wrapped its head around a woman Secretary General. And for anyone keeping score, 2025 was not a great year in this regard. Of the 9 organizations that had elections or appointments last year, only 2 chose women. But you know what? We will take the fantastic wins of our very own Diane Kiata as Executive Director of UNFPA, and Annalena Baerbock, who was appointed the 5th woman to serve as President of the General Assembly after our very own Maria Fernanda Espinosa, who served as the last woman in this position. And Baerbock has been assigned with the formidable task of overseeing the appointment and election of Antonio Guterres' successor. But we have your back, Excellency Baerbock, because this year's Women in Multilateralism report digs into the archives for the first comprehensive history of official women candidates in the last 9 elections for Secretary General. In the first 6 decades of the UN, not a single woman was put forward as an official candidate for the role. It wasn't until 2006 that the first woman was officially nominated for the Secretary General. The big breakthrough, of course, came a full decade later after reforms made the election process more transparent in 2016. As many of you recall, that year, 7 highly accomplished women were nominated for that position, many of whom then went on to found GWR Voices and are members with us here today. But look, even though Antonio Guterres ultimately won that election, right, it set a precedent because it was no longer possible to argue that there weren't enough women candidates to put forward. So look, I told you 10 minutes ago when we started this presentation that this was not a story about the symbolism of parity. This is a story through numbers about the sometimes slow, yes, progress toward further optimizing the institutions that make decisions on behalf of humanity. As we've discussed today, in a world where we really don't know what's going to happen next, the weight of history shouldn't be a burden that weighs us down, but a force driving the change from within. Thank you very much.